At 5:33, we'll call the meeting to order. The approval of the minutes of December the 6th, 2023.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just acknowledge that we had this on the agenda, but the minutes were not prepared in time for you all to receive them and review them. So if we could, I'd like to move the approval of those minutes to the next Planning Commission meeting.
Okay.
So I would invite a motion to table if that's acceptable, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So we have a motion to table the minutes for December the 26th, 2023.
I'll make a motion to table the minutes.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to table the minutes for December 6th, 2023. Ready for the question? All in favor, let it known by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Oppose? Ayes have it, motion carried. Number 3, subdivision and land development. Time extension to meet conditions of final plan approval at 250 College Avenue.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'll offer just a couple of brief remarks. And we do have the designer, Jason Best, here to speak to the project. Just want to remind us all that this is the redevelopment project for the former St. Joseph's Hospital on College Ave, and that this was approved a year ago with conditions, and the state law, the municipality's planning code allows 1 year to meet those conditions for the plan to be recorded. The developer has made major strides in meeting those conditions, but needs just a little bit more time to meet all of them, given the complexity of the project. So staff is recommending unconditional approval for that extension request. We do have the previous conditions of approval available if the if the commission needs more information. But if it's all right, I'd like to invite Mr. Best up in case he wants to offer more info.
Yes, Mr. Best.
Oh, hang on, one moment.
Oh, they got new stuff here? Right, you know, it's been a couple of dollars.
Okay, these tend to come in a little hot, just.
Okay, good to know. Green. All right, thanks. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Jason Best with ELA. Thank you for your time this evening. So a year ago, the Planning Commission granted conditional approval of the project, and I believe there were 15 conditions. We are concentrating our efforts on, tackling the remaining 2, which involve, a code compliance. We've submitted plans to the third-party reviewer. So that's, going through the code review process. My understanding is that there have been an exchange between the third-party reviewer and the architectural design team, and that they anticipate a final letter pretty soon. The other piece of that is the financial security. The applicant's lender and he are in discussion, and they're thinking that the closing will be in April. And so we've requested 90 days. And the financial security is, my understanding is that that's, pretty much linked with the lending. They anticipate that would probably be resolved about a week prior to closing, after which we would immediately record the plans. Do you all have any questions of me?
Do you expect that the 90-day time frame would be enough time to complete this?
I do. Based on what I'm understanding from the applicant, yes, I believe that to be enough time.
This might sound like a weird question, but I recently found out this is an issue. Your plan is set up in a way that it can be read in black and white, correct?
I mean, Yes, however, there probably will be some detail lost. I was not aware that that was going to be an issue.
I will note that the Land Development Code does require plans to be recorded, actually arguably submitted and recorded. We have allowed for color for staff review if that helps in the review process, but the ultimate plan has to be recorded, of course, in black and white. The challenge comes in with symbology, really. If you are using the same symbology for two different features,
Yeah.
and only differentiating by color, then when we get to the recording stage, that does become problematic.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure if we have an issue or not. I believe most of the color that we add is for impact or just clarity, but that the symbology is unique. So I will have to look at that.
Sure, and I'm happy to review that with you too, if need be, prior to recording.
Okay, thanks for bringing that to my attention. Thanks for your time.
Any comment, other comment from the commission? Any public comment? Hearing none.
I would like to make a motion to approve the extension to meet the conditions of the final plan for 250 College Avenue.
At the 90 days.
I'm sorry, the time extension of 90 days to meet the conditions.
And Mr., is your microphone on? And if you don't mind, just let's all speak a little bit closer to the mic just to make sure it gets captured for the webcast as well.
Should I repeat?
Sure, yeah, let's do that for clarity.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to extend the time extension, for meeting the conditions of the final plan approval for 250 College Avenue, to extend it 90 days.
I'll second that.
We have a motion on the floor to accept the plan, to extend it for 90 days to 50 College Avenue. Ready for the question? All in favor, let it know by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carried.
Thanks so much.
Congratulations. B, waiver of land development for McCaskey High School freezer expansion at 1020 Lehigh Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, I'll provide some brief comments on this. I don't believe anyone is here to represent this project tonight. Please let me know if anyone is. Okay. So this was a fairly simple project. Excuse me one moment. This was a fairly simple project for McCaskey that needed to be dealt with very quickly because of an issue with their freezer that they needed prepared before winter break was over. The city did provide them the building permit in advance, given the pressing nature of food, students coming in, et cetera. But I did let them know that this would have to be dealt with through the Planning Commission retroactively. So I'll just pull up a quick exhibit to show you what that change was. Which is fairly straightforward. So on the screen here, if you can follow my cursor, we've got a portion of the building here that's shown with a hatched solid line with some hatches, and it's the proposed freezer or proposed expansion of the freezer. So that is the portion that they built. This is at the rear of their property along the train tracks, off of the public right-of-way, not visible from the public right-of-way either. They did have to install some stormwater management, so they worked through those approvals with a large stormwater plan. So ended up having to record this anyway, and for the land record. So that's the retroactive action we're asking for the Planning Commission to provide, given the present time nature of this project.
Can I make a motion to approve the waiver of land development for McCaskey High School freezer expansion?
I'll second.
You have a motion and a second on the floor from the Cassidy High School freezer expansion development. Ready for the question? All in favor, let it know by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carried. C, waiver of land development for 522 Beaver Street for two-family home.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll provide some brief remarks here. I want to let you know that the landowner actually withdrew this request for this evening. Upon further review with planning staff, we determined that this would require a land development plan to be submitted. We advised them that the waiver would not be supported. They accepted the need for the land development plan and withdrew the application. So what you have on the screen here was literally just a shot of my phone of the building plans that were submitted a little too soon in the process. So we'll get all of that squared away, but what's being proposed here for your future knowledge is a 2-unit building on Beaver Street. This was a redevelopment authority property that you all had certified for blighted. The structure that was there was demolished as required by the redevelopment authority, and what's proposed there is currently really a duplex structure, side-by-side housing. So that will come back to us in a land development plan in the coming months. So no action needed on that item.
Thank you. D, waiver of land development for Lombardo Restaurant expansion at 216-222 Harrisburg Avenue, 211-222 West James Street.
Mr. Chairman, I'll provide a little bit of context here, and then we do have a designer, Brent Etter, here to speak to the project from David Miller Associates. So this was a final land development project that you all acted on. It had a conditional approval initially. They went forward and recorded those plans. There were some realizations on site before construction occurred that the plan actually needed to be altered, or the construction plan needed to be altered from what was recorded in the land records. So we've been working with Mr. Lombardo's team to rectify those issues. In the end, they ended up being fairly minor and just really are required some limited stormwater conveyance in order to fix the issue at hand. So I'm happy to pull up the exhibit I was provided, and I'll invite Mr. Detter and whoever else from his team needs to speak. Just give me one moment, I'll find that exhibit for you.
Good evening. My name is Brent Detter with David Miller Associates. As Douglas indicated, the plan was acted upon by the Planning Commission in August of 2023. We did record that plan in November of 2023. And unfortunately, during the meeting that we had on site, it was brought to our attention that there was a discrepancy between the building demolition permit application and our land development plan. And also between getting the plan approved by the Planning Commission, City Council also approved the demolition of 227 West James Street. So this plan, but the plan that you see in front of you is the previously approved and recorded land development plan. 227 West James Street was shown on there to be remaining, and then the portion of the footprint of the Penn State Lighting fixture building, that slab was shown to be remaining, when in fact that's going to be removed as part of the project. Douglas, if you want to go to the next slide, that would be great. And what you see in front of you now is the revised plan showing the removal of 227 and also the removal of the slab of the Penn State lighting fixture building. And if you want to go to the next one, Douglas. If you can just slide down a little bit more there, Douglas, that'll be great. Yeah, so this is the layout plan of the previously approved and recorded land development plan that shows 227. And you can see the outline of the concrete slab that was going to be remained. There's no additional building area. There was always a proposed building on top of that. So with this revision, there's no additional impervious surface. There is additional reconstructed impervious surface, and that's what we're taking care of with the previously approved underground stormwater system. There's no changes to the existing underground stormwater system other than some conveyance piping. And if you want to go to the last sheet, Douglas, that is an illustration of the revised plan that still shows that area of the Penn State lighting fixture building where the slab will be removed and the proposed building expansion on top of that. And now where 227 stood, there is now a concrete pad shown for the community herb garden. Those are the changes to the plan. Everything that was previously recorded has already been addressed. There's no additional parking. There's no additional impervious coverage other than the reconstructed impervious coverage. There's no change to the access to the site or to the layout of the buildings.
Mr. Ditter, if I may, is it fair to say that this is primarily a stormwater calculation matter and less so, changing much of the site plan?
That's absolutely correct. There's some additional underground conveyance that's being directed to the on-site stormwater detention facility. We've submitted all of the plans for that and all the stormwater calculations that indicate the previously approved system will be able to handle that reconstructed area.
The last thing I'd just like to say, and I'm happy to answer questions if need be. City staff has been close communication and with the developer and believe that we can take care of this through a waiver of land development. So that's what's being recommended. However, given that there are some minor infrastructure changes, there are some procedural things we'd like to take care of, and those are noted in the conditions of approval that we can walk through. These are fairly standard things. It's an update to the cost opinion, an update to the financial guarantee, an update to the developer's agreement, and just making sure that we're doing that all in the correct order. So happy to read through those. But just don't want to cut the conversation off if you have additional questions for me or Mr. Ditter.
I do have a question. What is happening with the three houses then? Are they staying then?
They are staying, yeah.
Okay.
They're being renovated. They were always indicated to remain, and there's been no change to the triplex.
Okay. I must have called something differently. That's why I was confused at first, because I thought they were being demolished, but I'm glad to see they're still on there. That's the only question I have.
Okay.
For the sake of the waiver, do we need to address, work with the address to make it 211 through 227 West James then? Should that be the way we bring that up for a motion to include 227 in that address, or is 222 enough?
So, good question, Mr. Whalen. I think that the way I have that listed there were the addresses that were included in the original land development plan. From my perspective, I think it's okay to use those addresses just because this is a waiver of the requirement to amend the previously recorded land development plan. But I'll also defer to the applicant if they would like any different action from the commission on that.
No, I'm fine with how it's written.
Okay. And I just want to pull up one other exhibit here to show you, the minor extent of the conveyance that is being added. And correct me if any of this needs to be updated, but the yellow highlights here indicate the additional conveyance that's being added to the site. and that's all tying into existing facilities that are there. So really, the only amendment to the previous plan, given what was previously proposed, is the addition of this. Now, we're also including the herb garden area and conveyance there, really out of convenience, since, it's efficient to do this all at the same time, and there were overlapping timelines with the demolition of this house just before recording. So that just gives you a sense of, the fairly limited changes that are being made to the site.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the waiver of LD for the largest restaurant expansion as defined here.
And sorry, Mr. Hackett, is that with the conditions of approval listed?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Douglas. And I'll second.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the waiver of the conditions. Ready for the question? All in favor, let it know by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carried.
Thank you.
Congratulations. E, preliminary final land development plan for Stadium Road 2 at 812 North Prince Street.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have much of an intro to provide here because I think we've got a capable team who's interested in walking through this project with you, but this is the final plan that's before you and where staff is recommending action. We do have a list of conditions we can go through if needed, and just also want to note that there are 3 modifications. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Morton and Mr. Lesher, and I'll pull up those materials as well.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm Ben Morton from RGS Associates, the landscape architect and land planner. And Ben Lesher of Parcel B Development is with me this evening as well. We first met with you back in June of this year to go over our sketch plan and concept for this site. I will say that we've really remained true to what the program was at that time and the layout of the site, and have really spent the following months dialing in everything in terms of compliance with the ordinance and working through the technical comments that we've received. This property, as Douglas said, is 812, and it's actually 2 properties at the moment that will be consolidated, 812 and 816 North Prince Street. On the western portion of the site, there's an existing apartment building known as Stadium Row that has 104 apartments in it now. And on the eastern portion of the site, there's a single-story office building, which is slated to be demolished as part of the project. With that demolition, there will be a 5-story building addition from the east face of the apartment building towards Prince Street. Within that building, on levels 2 to 5, there will be 95 new apartments with 53 parking spaces on the ground level beneath those apartment floors. There will also be 1 additional new apartment constructed in the existing apartment building by repurposing some fitness space that's actually going to move and be expanded in the new addition. There's also a cafe on the southeast corner of the building along Prince Street, which we did get a special exception approval for that use last June as well. In terms of site access, there are currently 2 access drives to the properties on North Prince Street. We'll be closing the southernmost one and shifting the northernmost one southward, I think about 15 feet or so that it better aligns with the parking. Has the benefit of helping some sight distance as well to the north. And that was approved by Traffic Commission in July. There's also another access to the west onto the private street of Thomas Armstrong Boulevard. That existing drive will remain unchanged. We are meeting our parking requirements, both vehicular and bicycle, just sort of to note that there are 201 physical vehicular parking spaces, but with credit for 5 more spaces due to the number of indoor and covered bicycle parking spaces. And there are 41 bike parking spaces in total, distributed between those that are within the building, some that are under cover of the parking level of the new building, and then also a rack that's related to the cafe as well. And there are some exterior ones in the plaza to the west. Speaking of that plaza, we are meeting the park and rec requirements through a variety of spaces, some existing, some proposed. Those include the existing plaza that's to the west, the portion of it that is actually on this property, as well as a new gathering space on the south side of the addition, where there's also a residential lobby that provides pedestrian access through the interior parking, but also directly out onto Stadium Drive, where folks can walk either to the west or over to Prince Street and beyond. There's also fitness rooms, rooftop deck, also a pet run area up on the upper level as well. If you want to go to the next slide, Douglas. Might be a little difficult to see, at least on this bigger view I've got here, but in terms of water and sewer, we are connecting to existing lines. The water comes in on the south end of the site. We're just tying into that. And then for sanitary sewer, we're connecting to existing laterals going towards both Stadium Drive and North Prince Street. And then the pipes that you see just north of the building under the parking are a new slow release subsurface system that will manage the volume and rate requirements for the new construction. I think our main topic and where most of the modifications were centered around is street trees. So we do have, and I guess you could go one more slide, Douglas. There are 7 street trees required on North Prince Street, and I guess I should clarify here that Stadium Drive is not a public street, and there were street tree sort of in-kind improvements made during the original project there. To the extent that you don't see trees towards the eastern end of the site there, it has to do with existing utility conflicts that are beneath the sidewalk in that location. But on North Prince Street, there are 7 street trees that are required. We are providing 5 new trees within the right-of-way, and we are retaining 1 existing tree that is also within the right-of-way, and then providing 1 street tree within an easement on site that is called out. As part of this, we're also looking at the 2 trees that are north of the access drive as being closer than the minimum 20 feet. But that was something that came out of our discussions with the urban forester back at pre-application, that it was preferable to have more trees spaced at less than the minimum than to have fewer individual trees. I'll also note that because of the access drive and then a utility pole and an existing boulevard lighting pole all in a row, we do then have 2 trees that are spaced at greater than the 50-foot maximum because of those areas where we can't plant. Otherwise, in terms of trees, though, we do have 33 landmark trees, and we are adding 5 additional parking lot trees to the 10 that were existing on the site. And other than the tree modification request, we did request a deferment of unit address assignment until we're at the building permit stage, when it will be just a bit more streamlined to handle that. So I think with that, happy to take questions.
I don't know that I have a question for you directly, but I'm just looking at the entire agenda, and I have more of a comment. Because I see that not just for this project, but going forward, there's more modifications being requested for the required number of street trees. And I do appreciate that this project and others are striving to meet the city standards, but I feel like we as a city need to do better about encouraging developers to get modifications for the parking minimums required, as opposed to having deficits of trees. I'm saying it's like y'all out there, us up here, because we're literally facing the ecological decimation of thousands of insects and birds, and trees like a white oak, which run out of space in urban environments, are critical for supporting thousands of species. So this isn't, like I said, this isn't about your project specifically. In fact, Mr. Lesher, I appreciate all you do to outreach to the community on your projects. This is part of why I was like, I feel confident speaking on this right now. But like, I feel like we as a city need to do better, and now that we have a comprehensive plan in place, should really consider looking at parking minimums and what we can do to reduce those requirements for developers. Because I hope to live in a day where the trolleys come back.
Gentlemen, do you mind if I provide a little bit of context here? And actually, it's funny you mentioned that, Mr. Dastra. Thank you for bringing that up. And given that this is relevant to all three final land development projects tonight, I intended to provide some commentary at some point on this during our meeting. So I'm glad you raised the issue. Our land development ordinance is quite aggressive in the way that it approaches trees, which is a good thing in many ways. However, in retrospect, it should have been written a little bit differently. And I just want to provide some context about what I mean about that. On a frontage like this, there are areas that we calculate that maybe should be exempt from the tree requirement for good reason. So, you probably know the exact frontage here, but 400 feet or so is the frontage, I think, and there's a tree required for every 20 or 25 feet there. What that does is it includes the driveway where we can't plant a tree. It includes sight lines for people to get in and out of the parking lot where we also ought not plant a tree, as well as a portion of this intersection at North Princeton Stadium Drive where we need to maintain sight lines as well. In addition to that, there may be other areas where we would not permit a tree to be planted, perhaps on top of a water lateral or something of that sort, or distance from a street light that has to be installed by our requirements. So we've been in a situation where we calculated based on the ordinance, which is what we need to do, but that the ordinance is not written as well as we want it to be. So this is an area that I've flagged for future amendment in the land development ordinance, and all three projects tonight have situations that I would categorize in this realm. And we'll get into each of them as we look at the additional land development plans. So it does give us the impression that we're constantly giving relief where we shouldn't be giving relief, but I would argue that it's actually that the standard is a little too aggressive and not, should I say, it's really not appropriately written.
Question also regarding that. Do we ask for payment in lieu of a tree? I forget.
We do, and maybe to that point, I'll just say a modification has been requested here, which would include counting the existing street tree on the frontage. Given that our position with the Planning Commission and as staff has been not to count existing trees because our ordinance does not permit us to do that, we would like to modify the modification. That payment in lieu of be provided for any trees that can't be provided on site. So we are holding the line in terms of, our ordinance says we need to require X trees. We're saying, yes, we're going to try to live up to that standard, but allow the developer to provide a fee in lieu of, so that we're meeting the spirit of the ordinance, but maybe not getting all the trees on site. So I'll note that because I actually missed including that in the conditions of approval for this project, but you'll see it's under the Catherine Hershey School project that comes later this evening.
Yeah. I actually want to say that I think you're right. And also, I don't know that the street line doesn't always need to be where these trees go. I think my concern is just generally the urban canopy. And when we do look at modifying the standards that do need to be modified, your points about driveways, water laterals, they all make perfect sense to me. But one of the things that's like, that makes me a little uneasy about street trees is that if in the future there is some sort of roadway expansion, or let's say a trolley line comes through and they're 50-year-old mature trees in the way that need to be cut down, figuring out ways that these trees can just go in the ground in the city as opposed to right along the street would also be encouraging to me.
I completely agree with you, Mr. Dastra. And if you haven't read the city's recent tree canopy report, it's on our website. Two highlights from that. One is that we're making gains in the public right-of-way. We're actually seeing an increase in canopy there, and it's I would argue that it's largely because of the number of developments we've had and the number of trees that we've recently required in our land development as well as our zoning applications for like parking lots. And then the other piece of that is that we're actually losing canopy on private property. Now, in this case, I think through developments, we are making headway, but it's owners that aren't necessarily aware of these challenges around our canopy, who are cutting trees down, or there may be development opportunities that replace pockets of forest that we had in the city. So we're reevaluating, those sorts of situations. But this is a problem that the right-of-way alone can't solve. We really need private property owners to, help get trees into the city.
Question real quick. Are there requirements in the ordinance for if a newly planted tree dies for whatever reason for the tree to be replanted in a certain amount of time?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
So if a street tree is planted as part of a new development project, and as sometimes happens, it dies within 6 to 12 months, are there requirements in the ordinance that require it to be replanted and maintained? Like trees that are planted as part of development projects, are there requirements to make sure they are maintained?
Absolutely. So the way that we hold the developer accountable in these situations is through our financial guarantee, and we do collect financial guarantee for all of the trees and all the landscaping that's being provided. And if I'm not mistaken, the ordinance requires it be established for 2 growing seasons, and then we would release the financial guarantee. So at that point, beyond the 2 years, if the tree dies, really the shade tree ordinance comes into play. If it's a street tree and it dies and there's an empty well, if it dies, it has to be removed. If there's a well there that's empty, it has to be replaced. So there are other ordinances that kind of come to aid in that situation. The same would be true for trees required by zoning and parking lots. Those would technically need to be replaced in order to maintain zoning compliance there.
So there's currently a building on that site?
Yes.
It's being demolished?
Yes.
Okay. Can you talk about how the residents of these buildings enter from the parking lot and how ADA accessibility is being accommodated?
I only didn't catch the last couple words you said.
Just how the traffic enters and exits the building. Actually, I have 2 questions regarding the traffic of the building. So one, how it enters and exits through, I know where the main entrance is of the existing building, but is there a back entrance that's closer to the parking area? 2, between the existing building and the proposed building, is there a pedestrian pathway that walks through that open, or are those 2 buildings connected? And if so, is there a thoroughfare to it? And my last question is ADA accessibility. Where do you anticipate the ADA parking spaces? How close are they within the proximity of the building? And how is it for a wheelchair or somebody with a mobility device to enter through that front door?
Sure. So in terms of, I guess, talking one about just the vehicular accessibility to that parking area, that is, if you're going along the north side of the new portion of the building, you go a little farther to the west, Douglas, with your cursor, there's 2 trees at islands. That's where vehicles can enter into the parking space underneath and circulate. And we do have an area reserved underneath for vehicles to turn around in there to give some additional room to do so.
That's under the building?
Yes. And then in terms of the access points, I guess I should say from levels 2 to 5, or rather 2 to 4, the buildings are interconnected on the inside, so people will be able to use any of the various entrances to get to their apartment, depending on where they park or where they're walking to. I think, that's kind of the beauty actually of how some of these entrances are set up, that you have different ways you can come out of the building depending on what your mode of travel is going to be when you leave on that trip. So at the existing building, there are entrances on both the north side at the middle of the building as well as the south side, and those are connected via one cohesive internal space. And that provides access both to the on-site amenity outside as well as, a pedestrian approach, and then to the parking to the north. And then with the new building, there is that entry identified in the middle of the southern portion of that building, which again provides access to the undercover parking as well as out to Stadium Drive for pedestrians. And then, to your point, the area underneath where the buildings connect, but at level 1 or ground level, that is open so that you can walk through from the north parking lot down to the sidewalk along Stadium Drive.
So if I parked on the north side of the proposed building,
Mhm.
and and let's just say I'm at the parking space closest to North Prince Street, at the northernmost space, I have to walk down that parking lot or around the building to get it through the front. There's not an access in the back. Is there building access in the back of that proposed building? Because
You can actually come through the back, actually, where there's a bit more hatching near the tree right below where it says easement. That area in there is one pass-through that you could get into the underbuilding parking area and get to that central area. What I can't recall, Ben, is it possible to access the stair tower from Prince Street coming in, or is that egress only?
Yeah, you could enter from
Yeah.
Main Street.
Okay, so you could enter from Prince Street at that stair tower as well. And then in terms of accessibility and parking, I think you can see it a little better as we've been zooming in. We did distribute the parking between both the existing entrance and the new entrance, which the new entrance gives the opportunity for some of those spaces to be covered as well. And we did treat the calculation of the number of spaces as though the area under the building is actually its own parking facility, because it's essentially it's a better place to park your car is undercover. And so we do have the appropriate number of spaces under there. It's actually, we're just at the tipping point where 3 were required under there.
And I assume that the cafe would be open to the public?
Yes.
Not just for the building?
Yep.
That's all I got.
Any further comment from the commission? Any public comment?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just, again, remind the commission that I would like to add one condition to this, and I'll just read that here. So the modification to 265-33M4, which is for the number of street trees, is modified such that the existing tree on Prince Street does not count towards the street tree requirement, and instead is applied to the fee in lieu of planting amount. Aside from that, the other conditions stand unchanged. So we're referencing the comment letter, which you all have, some of which have just minor technical outstanding issues. And then otherwise, there's the fee in lieu of planting, the cost opinion, the financial guarantee, and developer's agreement, which is just a standard form to make sure that we have the right to inspect and release financial guarantee based on satisfactory inspections. So that would be 6 conditions we'd be recommending for this project, as well as the approval of modifications as I amended.
Sorry, can I ask one more question regarding the intersection of Stadium Drive, Clay Street, and North Prince Street? I see that there's some striping there for pedestrian pathways. Are there any additional traffic calming measures that are being considered in order to make that, I mean, North Prince Street, people fly down that road. I've seen them, and I've been guilty of it once, going like 50 miles an hour because I've been in a hurry, but only one. Anyway, one is too many times. However, just to, other things to try to make that crossing a little safer.
We have not had anything in mind with that, and I will say actually that while we're illustrating the crosswalk here, the crosswalk and the curb ramp on the opposite corner are actually covered under the original land development plan for Stadium Row. There have been some challenges in terms of the design of that curb ramp, given the neighboring property and some encroachments in the right-of-way that we're working through with our HOP right now. But in our discussions with the city engineer and Public Works as to the arrangement here, that was not something that was desired to add traffic calming.
I'll just add that the city has been implementing traffic calming measures throughout the city based on the Vision Zero plan, and I don't believe that this portion of Prince Street or this intersection was noted as one of our high injury network locations. We're trying to use the data that we have for areas with the highest number of crashes to drive the investments that we're making in the city to make sure that we're maximizing impact. We do regularly look at these intersections for smaller improvements, like making sure there's high visibility crosswalks there and ADA compliant ramps. But in some cases, that is deemed sufficient by our engineering staff. And I can't necessarily speak to all the details of why, but I know that they review these plans pretty thoroughly for pedestrian safety, and this was not flagged as an area where we needed more than what's shown on the plan.
Where is that area that has the flash, the buttons that you can push? It's right, it's within close proximity of that. Do you know where the flashing light? That's at Frederick?
Frederick, yeah. And I would say if there are concerns about, intersections, just in case I haven't mentioned this before, the Traffic Commission is often the place where these concerns can be brought up, and we would initiate an engineering study of the intersection, look at crash data, and in some cases, do implement improvements or make sure site distances are safe at the intersections.
Douglas, Mr. Chair. I have a point of clarification. Nicole asked about the entryway from the northern side of the parking lot behind the building. You said that there is an entryway from that side into the building. Does it provide the access to the actual entry to the residence areas?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yep. What you're saying on the north side, or?
Mr. Morton, is this the area where you can come into the garage that you pointed out before? I know there's one, clearly they can walk through the lanes here, and you can walk through the front, through the stairwell. Is there another one here that I'm missing?
Maybe I can
Yeah.
just, in general, basically we're constructing one new stair tower, which is,
You want to state your name?
yeah, Ben Lesher with Parcel B. Yeah, we're constructing one new stair tower right there on Prince Street, so there'll be an entrance there to go up the steps. The residents start on the second floor. I think we're actually calling it, well, yeah, I guess it is level 2. And then we're also building a new elevator, which is in the middle, and that's on the south side. And then we're also utilizing the existing stair tower on the east end of the existing building, and you can also on the north side there. So you can walk in there and go up the steps. Almost the entire like where the dotted line is, the light orange, that whole face is basically entirely open. You'll just have structural columns coming down. So you can walk through that, to the elevator, or you can kind of go around the sides. If that answers, yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Any further questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary and final land development plan for Stadium Road 2 with the conditions as amended by Douglas.
I'll second.
You have a motion for a second to amend the minutes, for this project. Ready for the question? All in favor, let it known by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.
Thank you.
Edit. Preliminary final land development plan for 118 North Prince Street, mixed use located at 116/124 North Prince Street.
Sorry, give me one moment here. We lost our PDF viewer. Mr. Smith, is this the one that we should start with?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Sounds good.
So I'll just briefly say that this is a plan that has been in the works for quite some time that I believe we've had an initial presentation on in the past. Is that
We did.
right? And this is being recommended for conditional approval this evening. Many of the conditions that we went over for Stadium Road 2 actually apply to this project as well. I think with that, I'll just hand it over to the development team. Mr. Smith.
Sounds good. So I'm Craig Smith with RGS Associates, and with me is Kirk Sears, who is the property owner and developer. And like Douglas said, you have seen this project. We did brief you on this project. It's been a few months now since we were last here, but what I can do is just give you a brief update and go over the plans. I do have a couple other 3D renderings just to show you what the intent of the project is as well. So what you're seeing on the screen here is along Prince Street on the right-hand side, Water Street on the left-hand side. And right now there's a building on the south side of the property. It's about 0.35 acre property. And there's a building that exists there now. And to the north is largely a parking lot. And so we're redeveloping this property to develop this into an apartment building. The apartment building is 7 stories high and consists of 72 units, largely 1-bedroom units. There's also some retail space that's proposed on the northeast corner along Prince Street, as well as the southeast corner along Water Street. So there's about a 3,000 square foot retail component to the project as well. So the units are located, there are 7 units located on the first floor, and it's kind of a unique site, if you're familiar with the site, in the fact that Prince Street sits about 6 feet higher than Water Street. So there are 7 units, 1-bedroom units that are located in the interior of the lowest level. It's almost midway, if you will, between the two. We actually did receive approval from the zoning hearing board to have those 7 units located what's essentially on the ground level in this area of Lancaster City. The remaining apartments are located on the 6 stories above. I will say the top 2 stories are actually consist of duplexes, meaning they are actually 2 stories, 2-story duplexes on the top unit. One of the things that's a nice, unique part of the project is what we're calling a pass-through park that's proposed along the south side of the building. You can see that in the kind of the pinkish color. Right now, this is just to the north of, I don't remember the new restaurant name, what used to be Pour and the Beer Wall. They have some seating outside that's along Prince Street. What we'd like to do is retain some of the availability to have the restaurant seating there and actually propose a pedestrian connection going from Prince Street to Water Street so that we have this pass-through park. And I'm going to show you kind of what that looks like on the next slide. But it's a unique situation where we can provide a public space for people to go back and forth. There's actually the 3rd level of the building, and it's hard to see here, on the lower left-hand corner actually extends over this pass-through park. What's happening down on Water Street is there are arches that exist there. The developer is willing to retain some of the arches to provide this entryway into the park space. And on the other side, on the Prince Street side, the building facade that's up on the building corner, just the facade, not what's behind it, will be retained, from an aesthetic standpoint as well. So again, this provides this public park space and provides that pedestrian connection. And Douglas, if you could go to the next, there's only 2 more slides, but this gives you a better idea of kind of what the building looks like and what this park will look like, if you can flip to that.
Hang on, I'm working on it. Sorry, is it another PDF? Is it the park?
There should be 3 PDFs, and maybe that's why.
First.
What's that?
The building or the park view first?
The building's fine. Yeah.
There we go.
So this is from the Prince Street side, and you can see there on the lower portion, that building facade is going to be retained, so it looks, like the building that's there. And you can see where the string lights are. That's the entryway to the pass-through park. And then you can see kind of how the building, the materials look through that 7 stories up to those top units, again, that you can see are actually 2 stories in size. That gives you just an idea of what the building will look like. And if you can go to the next one. This gives you an idea, again, from Prince Street, what the pass-through park will look like. And you can kind of get a view down through of kind of what that space looks like. In the middle there's a little bit of a ramp, again, to pick up the grade, but there's the availability to provide some seating on the left-hand side. One of the things that we did as a part of this, looking at this pass-through park, is really looked into the safety aspects, did some research. You can see the plant material that we are proposing is not something that's going to get overgrown. Visibility, the fact that people don't have the ability to hide in some of these spaces. And if you can see the sight lines down to Water Street is important. We're proposing lighting as a part of the plan. The maintenance will be the responsibility, even though it's a public space, of the apartment project itself. So we did some fairly long research into some of the safety aspects that go along with the public park nature. So was that all the PDFs I gave you? I'm forgetting now. Or was there one more?
Those were the 3 PDFs.
Okay.
And while I have the mic here, I'll just say that, you know, we engaged very closely with the developer and designers on the safety of this pass-through area, and we actually involved one of our sergeants on our police force to meet on site with their team and myself to review this area for all the best practices that we could implement here. And as far as I can see, they were pretty much all incorporated. So that's really, really great to see. And I just want to commend the developer for being willing to offer such a great public amenity too in this case.
So if you go back to the plan, just a couple other brief items, and then I can answer any questions that you may have. Stormwater management was looked at thoroughly on this plan. There is a vegetated roof. There's actually a 48-inch pipe that's proposed underneath the pass-through park that's going to function as slow release. The actual park surface itself is exempt from stormwater management because of the public nature. However, the rest of the impervious coverage, we're making sure we're collecting, and it's going to go to the vegetated roof or into the cistern for slow release. The utilities are largely going to the Prince Street side, so there's a public water connection, public sewer connection that's over in that area. As far as utilities go, we are requesting, as Douglas mentioned, a modification of the street tree requirement. And again, this is purely on the Water Street side. If you're familiar with the Water Street side, again, to retain the arches, there's only a certain amount of width for the sidewalk to occur. If you had to do the required tree wells and the structural soils and everything that's associated with that, there is a low voltage power line that actually exists in that area as well. So we want to make sure we have safe passage through this area, pedestrian passage, as well as into the building. That gives us a limited width to do so. So we're requesting the modification to allow to not put in essentially what would be 4 street trees. We will pay the fee in lieu of for those 4 street trees. On the Prince Street side, there is a pair that will be taken down. Not the most desirable species for the city anyway, but that will be taken down because of construction. We are proposing the required street trees on the Prince Street side. So that being said, we are working through the final things for approvals. The architect is going to the Historical Commission later in February. We are going to the Shade Tree Commission on February the 20th. We were supposed to be there last month. However, it snowed that day, so that meeting was canceled. We're working through the last parts of the sewer planning module as well as the utility HOP with PennDOT for the connection of the utilities in Prince Street. So that's really where we're at right now. Any questions from the Planning Commission?
I do have a quick question. I think it's pretty clear, but just to clarify. So the current restaurant seating for Passerine is actually on your property?
Correct.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Douglas, can you go back to the picture that had the individuals?
Sure. Give me one moment here. Sorry, did you want the building or the park?
That had the individuals walking through.
Oh, yeah. Here.
Yeah. So this looks like a great building. I would just like to say, something that came to my mind is that there's no people of color in this photo. So not reflective of our residents, the mixture of people. Just
Okay.
a comment.
Understood.
Mr. Smith, just a few questions about the park itself. I guess number one, how does the width of the space compare to what Passerine or formerly the Poor has right now, out of curiosity? It looks like you got 9 feet of walking space and then some, if you wouldn't mind putting up the site plan.
Yeah, so if you picture the entrance, that's going to stay the same. There's actually an overhang that's going to be part of the building, and yeah, there you go. Can you turn that function thing off? Or is that, there's like a function. Did everybody else see that?
Yeah.
That's just out here, but there's something that's blocking that. As long as you're not seeing it, it's fine. You're good. You're good.
Yeah, what is that say?
I don't know. It's a lamplight. I better hurry up. Okay. That's fine. I know what it looks like. But to answer your question, there's an overhang there that will remain. There is a bump out right now that if you're looking at it, there's a door that exists. That is going to go straight back. So that width is going to go, that building's going to be taken out. That's going to go straight back. As far as the seating goes, that portion is actually identical to what's out there. The thing is, we're not going to let that spill over to a certain area. So we provide a nice wide entranceway. We're actually doing some paving patterns that delineate just by the use of a different color, so that, okay, people can sit here and the tables will be there. And again, this is under the owner's control. It's more of a, allowing them to use the space.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so is it actually a fully dedicated public park at this point, or is it something that you're going to control and then allow the public to use?
So it's going to be owned and maintained by the developer, by the apartment project. We're proposing an access easement. So a public access easement through that entire space so that the public can use it. That's really the intent.
Gotcha. So then, obviously, letting Passerine use that is the goal.
Yes, there's.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Kirk Sears with 118 Prince LLC, and the area that is going to be allocated for them will be, I'm not sure how many feet wide, 6, 7, 8 feet wide, and the length of their current service area to the right of the exit out of their building, and that will be it's not, that part is not part of the public access agreement, so that they can have control of their tables, basically.
Okay, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I just was not entirely clear as to how the space would function, if it were to be under the control of the city, or whether it be private, as you described it. I'm glad to hear that they've got, 7 or 8 feet.
It will be pretty much open to the space, but they will have, I assume there'll be a sign for Passerine, so they can use it versus people coming and sitting just at will, so.
Yeah, for someone who's been to that restaurant over about 4 different iterations, I'm sure if you have 2, it is incredibly tight in there, so they need that space. At one point, there's this beautiful dogwood that was right in the middle of there, but I digress. I got taken down. So I just want to see it utilized as the best possible use moving forward, so. Mr. Sears, if you could stand at the podium again, please, I'd appreciate it.
Yes.
I just want to make a quick comment, and if you don't mind, my fellow commissioner brought it up, and I think we moved a little too quickly after her comment. I would just ask if you could, I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything like that, but I would like us to embrace the tension. It's okay. What are your thoughts on that comment that my fellow commissioner made about no persons of color in that photo? Because that whole area does represent a big bag of Skittles, if you will.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that go on in that area. There's a lot of homelessness in that area. So what are your thoughts?
I agree. It's an oversight on the image developed by the architect to show the space. I think this is a multicultural city, and we welcome people to use the space, and it doesn't matter race, color, or anything. It's an open city, so.
I appreciate that. Again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything like that, but I appreciate the transparency.
I have another question, and I apologize. You may have gone over this with your first presentation or even this evening, and I missed it. Are there any open public spaces on the first floor, cafes or storefront?
Yes, so if you go back to the plan, so on the Prince Street side, where the triangle in the middle of the site is, that's essentially the lobby, the entryway into the apartment community. The bluish area to the north of that, with the door on the north side, that whole section in there is the retail space that's open to the public. If you go down diagonal to the southwest corner on Water Street, where that triangle is, essentially that retail space wraps the corner with Water Street and the public park. So that's intended to be retail at that lower level.
Can you confirm that that lighting through the pedestrian pathway goes the whole way from Prince to Water? And then will that be lit, at all hours of dark?
So we do, and Douglas and I spoke with it, we have the lighting plan just prepared. We're going to be submitting that. That's a condition of approval for the city to review and approve, but it's a combination. There's some string lights that are proposed to kind of stay in context with what's out there now on the Prince Street side. There are some wall lights. There are planter walls in there to get some green space. In the middle of that, there's some wall lights that will shed light for a pedestrian. There's some bollard lights, some short bollard lights. And then I believe in the overhang, there's some other lights that are going to be proposed to make sure that it's a well-lit area.
I might also have a question. Over here.
Yeah.
Hi. So I was just curious, the historical elements that are being preserved as part of this development plan, the facade on Prince Street and the arches on Water Street.
Right.
Is the plan to dismantle those pieces and reconstruct them, or is it to leave them up, brace them until the new building is constructed?
To be honest, that's a good contractor question. I believe on the Prince Street side that's pretty much the case. I think in both cases, they're going to try and work around whatever they can just to preserve that facade. But I can't answer that question in detail, just to be honest with you.
I think I can answer that. In all the meetings we've talked about, it's all going to be shored up and secured and then built on the inside, so.
Thank you.
What about bike parking?
So bike parking is largely in the bike room, which is at the entrance from the park. There's a triangle that's located to the park. That's a secondary entrance to the apartment building. There's a bike room right inside. There's 14 bikes that are proposed, can be stored there. There's actually bicycle parking for the retail as well. So there's 16 bicycle parking spaces proposed, 15 are required. So
Where's the bicycle parking for the retail space?
I think it's up by Prince that's shown up there. Yeah, I think it's up there. Yeah.
Gotcha. So you just have a rack there, perfect.
Yeah.
I've got a question. And also thank you for all your comments at the last, I know I had a lot of questions at the last time you presented, so thank you for your explanations. And thank you for having a park as part of your plan. My only question tonight is I forget if I asked this last time, is the roof, the vegetated roof, which thank you for including, by the way, is that being envisioned as an additional park at all in any capacity?
Not the vegetated roof itself. I mean, not where they're having the vegetated roof. There are some areas out there for residents, but they're not necessarily the same area as what the vegetated roof. The green area, this image is a little bit confusing, but the green area is to delineate where actually the vegetated roof exists.
Right. I
Or will
remember if that was like a lawn and accessible, or if it was like another. Anyway, that answers my question.
Yeah, and one of the things we did was, we looked at, things that are required for HVAC, obviously those types of things, where people could go outside, that type of thing. And so where we couldn't do vegetated roof, we're overcompensating for that in this underground storage for stormwaters to make sure we're covering all the impervious on the site.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Silly question. The pass-through park, that is just for pedestrians? There will be no emergency vehicular traffic or?
No, it's just for pedestrians. Yeah.
Where is the loading? Do you have a loading zone or a?
So the loading zone is on the Water Street side, where you see the two triangles. And the idea there is, and we actually talked about this, we were out with Douglas and the police sergeant to kind of talk through that aspect as well. We're proposing some depressed curb that's along that area. And the idea is that someone could, if they're moving in, they could pull up to the curb and they could get their stuff out and get through that loading area. The other idea is there's parking on the other side, on the west side of Water Street, that could be reserved. So depending on the apartment complex, the people that are running that, they could actually reserve that for someone to come in and actually use those parking spaces for a period of time to help unload as well. So that's really the way that loading is being handled along Water Street.
And then my last question is, where's the trash room and how do you see that being picked up?
So the trash room is, most of the mechanical spaces are up on the northwest corner, and that is, I believe the trash room is in that area, correct, Kirk?
Yeah, it's just, I think the trash room is just above the top triangle.
Right. And so access will be from that trash room to get the trash out that direction as well. So that's really, that Water Street side is really, that's kind of the service area, if you want to call it.
Well, so will that trash truck to pick up that trash have to back in off of Prince Street?
Off of Prince Street?
Yeah, didn't you
No.
say it was on the north?
On the northwest, the west. So where the double triangles are, no, they won't have to, no. And
I think I was following the map and not, okay. So the trash truck would then be off of Water Street?
yes, yes,
Got it.
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I was really confused.
that's okay.
Makes much more sense.
And then the street trees, you said, how many trees will you pay for?
So there's 4 street trees required. There's about 100 linear feet of frontage along the Water Street side. So every 25 feet, there's 4 trees that are required. That will be part of the fee in lieu of. Anything else?
I just have one question regarding parking. I know that this does not require parking, but just curious to know if you've looked at the garages that are within really close proximity of this location to see if they have capacity to.
Yeah, this being in the CV1, parking is not required. There are obviously a lot of on-street parking and the garages directly across from Prince Street. I don't know if Kirk, you guys have looked into that.
About a year ago, we talked with them, and there were, they wouldn't give me the exact count of the open spaces that were in the Prince Street garage, but they indicated that there's more than 50 at the time. But as far as I've heard, we've directed people from our lot. We basically asked them to be out by the end of February, and many of them told me they're moving into that Prince Street lot. So I can't tell you. They wouldn't tell me how many spaces they had last time I checked. So,
Ms. Dufer, I can add that in my last conversation with Lancaster Parking Authority Director Larry Cohen, he told me that the Prince Street garage is one of the garages with the most capacity, which I was surprised to find out just because it's such a central parking garage, but it is also one of the larger ones that they own.
Any other comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just add that for the general public, I'm so pleased to have a planning commission that asks so many good questions and is equity-minded and is a commission that represents the diversity of our city as well. So I just want to commend the commission on, being brave enough to approach these topics with the public and to prioritize these things. Of course, they were great to work with the comprehensive plan and the ways that we elevated equity thinking and planning in that document. And, I imagine we'll continue that work. So I want to say that to the commission. And then also just more practically say that the conditions of approval that are listed here, 1 through 5, don't need to be amended. That the plan staff is recommending this plan for approval, including the modification, subject to those 5 conditions.
Can I make a motion to approve, to conditionally approve the preliminary plan, preliminary final land development plan for 118 North Prince Street, assuming that all of the conditions of approval, 1 through 5, will be met prior?
I second.
We have a motion on the floor and a second to approve the preliminary final plan development, 118 Prince Street, and 116, 124 North Prince Street. Ready for the question? All in favor, let it know by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carried.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. G, preliminary plan, final land development plan for Catherine Hershey School for early learning located at 242 North Plum Street, 348 4th Street, and 3 Tobacco Avenue.
Give me just one moment. Pull up that PDF. Mr. Chairman, again, I'll just say that this project is recommended for conditional approval this evening. We can get into those particulars after the presentation. This is a project that you've seen before at a previous meeting with a courtesy presentation from the developer. And I think you'll be excited to continue to learn more about this and really the incredible mission that this project is looking to fulfill on site. Mr. Morton.
Yeah. So, Ben Morton, RGS Associates again. There are a few other people who are here with me this evening, part of the much larger team that are making this great project a reality. Right next to me here is Senate Alexander, who's the Executive Director of Catherine Hershey Schools for Early Learning. Senate was not able to be here at our introductory presentation, but I know during the question and answer session, if you've got any questions that are related to the background and mission and program of the schools, he'd be happy to answer those at that time. We're also joined by Elliot Robinson, who's the Vice President of Administration for Milton Hershey School, Bill Wass, who's the Project Manager from Milton Hershey School, as well as Jim Spade from JSDC Law Offices. I think I was, rather than situate us in sort of our status on a couple things, I'm going to jump right into getting you back into the project and kind of touch upon some of the other approvals we've gotten as we go along the way. This site was actually one of the first projects that I worked on when I joined RGS and was known as Tobacco Avenue at the time. And that project stalled with only some of the improvements completed. And so there are 3 existing buildings on the site, which are numbered as 1, 2, and 4 here. Building 1 was substantially rehabilitated as part of that other project. And there were also some significant infrastructure upgrades installed, including a realignment of a public sewer main through the site, had gone through the northern side and now goes more through the middle. As well as the installation of an underground stormwater facility that we are reusing for this project. But, the goal now for this site is to provide free all-day, weekday daycare, as well as education, and then family support services for 150 children and their families, as well as some additional office space for the Catherine Hershey Schools. And to make that come together from a site planning standpoint, the key building additions here are the new Building 3, building addition on the east side of Building 4, and a pedestrian bridge that links those together and ties them in over to Building 2. And so, there are a few different perspectives to look at sort of how the site functions access-wise in terms of both getting to the site and then the various buildings on here. So I thought I'd walk you through each of those. For children and families or children who are arriving on shuttle buses and vans that CHS will be operating, they'll enter from Walnut Street, where there's an existing access drive. It'll be one way in and restricted again only to those shuttles and families driving. They'll be able to park on the ground level of Building 3 or continue into the center of the site and utilize some of the outdoor parking spaces that are there. From there, they'll walk to the Building 4 addition, where the front door for the facility is for families. And then within that building is where the classroom space is, as well as office space for administrative services and some unprogrammed space that will be, thought through in the future. With having the pedestrian bridge, then, actually, before I get to the children, I'll just say then the family members can come back out to their cars and they will all exit via North Plum Street. The children, once they're in there, are going to be able to circulate indoors to Building 2, where there's an innovation lab and gross motor skills facility, as well as to the significant outdoor play and education areas, which are both on top of the parking at Building 3, as well as on the ground level in the core of the site with a STEM garden, playground, and some outdoor classroom space. And again, tying these all together makes it so that it's a safe, secure, and comfortable environment and still utilizing all of these interesting buildings that are on the site. Some staff members will be able to park on the site, and if they're parking either within Building 1, they'll enter from North Plum Street and exit there. There are a few other spaces off of Tobacco Avenue that can be accessed there. But the majority of employees are actually going to park just east of what you see on your screen. The address of that property is 226 North Ann Street, but they actually access that property from Walnut Street. And as part of our appearance at the Zoning Hearing Board, we obtained a special exception to allow that off-site parking. And for those who do park off-site, they'll walk along Walnut Street and then enter the facility through the north side of Building 2, which again then connects them to Buildings 3 and Buildings 4 on the interior. And then there's a covered walkway that leads over to Building 1. For employees, families, and children who arrive as pedestrians, we have direct connections and accessible connections to the sidewalk, both on Walnut Street and then also on Fulton Street. And at Fulton Street, the connection is directly into Building 4 via a ramp that gets you to the appropriate levels within there. In terms of trash and deliveries, we have trash enclosures and loading docks at both the south side of Building 4 and the south side of Building 2, and those will be accessed from the appropriate points of the street network with each of those. I think, Douglas, if you want to go to the next screen. Just in terms of some of those utility items, we've highlighted in sort of the red how we're reorienting the public sewer main that runs through the site so that it allows us to have the Building 4 addition and keep the stormwater management facility and provide an adequate easement for future work. It is going underneath the pedestrian bridge, and I believe that's one of the conditions of approval relates to coming to terms with our sewer easement agreement with the city. We've already had, I think, very productive conversations on that and are working towards resolving the specific language there. As I mentioned, the stormwater management facility was already installed, but we are doing some real reworking to the conveyance on site so that we meet the current stormwater management ordinance and its higher volume and rate control targets than when this was originally installed, and we've been able to do that. And on a related note, I'd say we have obtained the approvals we need from the Lancaster County Conservation District, as this site does have an open MPDS permit. So that is ready to go as well. I think that certainly there could be many other questions about the site, but I think that brings us to the question of trees, which we have a few different situations happening at this site that relate to our requests, both for quantity and fee in lieu of payments, as well as spacing requirements. Douglas, if you'd like to go one more. So starting with Walnut Street, here, and we did talk about this when we were in the last time, are looking to do something a little bit different here, given the nature of this site and its location along, well, really both Plum and Walnut as an important node in the city, and taking it as a place to create views and connections both for motorists and pedestrians that engage with this site. And so there are 8 street trees required on this frontage. When we are providing 8 trees, but we have 6 of them clustered more closely together at the western half of the frontage, and then 2 that are being provided on site just north of Building 2 that will both be within street tree easements. In some areas of the sort of the brick band landscape area of the streetscape right in front of Building 2, we are providing shrub and perennial plantings that kind of call to mind what has been in place along with the street trees at Ewell Plaza to really make a transition between the more naturalistic BMP planting in the rain garden towards then the landscaping that'll be more formal surrounding the plaza on the site. So we are getting to the required number of trees there. I don't know that it's a modification per se, but the location being on site does certainly require your assent. And then I think actually to Douglas's point about areas that you can't plant within, we would likely have a spacing issue here anyway. But we do need to seek relief to allow the 6 trees towards the west to be planted 10 feet apart rather than the minimum of 20. I will say there are overhead electric lines here that would have limited our ability to plant large trees anyway. So I think this clustering effect actually allows us to create a unique streetscape for this location. I'll come back to the other frontages, but Douglas, if you want to move to the perspective view that the architect put together here, the one liberty that they took was to not put in the power lines, and they said they didn't want to pay the renderer to make it look worse. I do think that hurts the understanding of how these trees are really fitting in with power lines that are on both Plum Street and Walnut Street, but I promise that they are there. But what you're seeing here is that we have this plaza, there's going to be this sculptural element related to the schools, and then on Building 3, there are these panels that right now they don't reflect what is specifically going to be on them, but it's sort of a placeholder that was part of what was shared with the Historical Commission for decorative metal panels that will have some historical narrative element related to both Milton and Catherine Hershey and their history in Lancaster City. And this has led also to sort of our placement of the trees so that these elements are visible as you're coming from North Plum Street or Walnut Street. So that's really the story of what's happening on Walnut Street. If you want to go back to the tree exhibit. Then on North Plum Street, we've got a combination of the challenges to look at, and I think we've done our best to get a number of new trees in here. There are 10 street trees required. We are providing 7 new trees, all of which are north of the access drive. We are retaining 1 existing tree, which, as Douglas noted, does not get counted, but it felt odd to us to remove a tree simply to get a tree that we could count, especially since the required arborist report said it was in excellent health. And it was not planted that long ago. It was actually planted as part of the stalled project, and does have structural soils beneath the sidewalk related to it. I highlighted in sort of a red there the area that we can't plant because of the access drive and utility pole separation. And then south of the existing tree, we have areas that are, again, as Craig was talking about with Water Street, too narrow for us to be able to plant in, because we have an ADA ramp that's existing that gets to a portion of Building 1 that's disconnected from the west end. And then on Fulton Street, we are in that circumstance where we have 5 feet from the existing building face to the back of curb, and both with the city's requirements, but then also with the public right-of-way accessibility guidelines that were recently adopted. Even at sort of the pinch points, you can't go below 4 feet of clearance, so there's just really not a way to get a tree into that narrow of a space and allow it to grow and meet those requirements. But with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and discuss with you.
I remember at one point when you first, or maybe it was the second time you presented it to us, we talked about on East Fulton Street, because street trees weren't going to be a reality at that point, more towards the southeast corner of Building 1, there's a couple places where there aren't windows, it was bricked over, perhaps doing green walls. Was that a discussion that went any further than here?
So the issue remains there that with where the building is located relative to the sidewalk, there just isn't space for actually having any soil media even for the planting, because we're on the right-of-way and have that 5-foot minimum sidewalk width that is both a city and PRO-AG requirement. So, and again, since it's an existing building that's there and also was recently rehabilitated, it's not really open for creating even just little insets to facilitate that.
I have a question. I'm curious about Tobacco Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Enter from both sides, or is it a two-way or just a one-way?
It is two-way, and I'll note it's sort of in this strange way. It is a common alley, and so it's not actually a public street, but although anyone kind of does use it. So you can access it from either end, but it is fairly narrow, and sometimes people are parked on either side on one end or the other. So we're not using that that's part of why we did not include that as part of more of our public circulation, and really just, relating to trash and some deliveries to Building 4.
Would it be required, Douglas, or could it be something safe to do to make it one-way? So that you could only get to one side and go out the other side?
So the city has, as I understand it, no jurisdiction really on these commonalities. And I'll say a little more about that because they're unusual, but also very common in the city. Most of the alleyways you're probably familiar with that often are like behind a set of row homes and things. Many of those are common alleys, and the city does not maintain them, and it's not considered public space. The legal arrangement is that each adjacent landowner owns an undivided portion of the whole. So they can't say these 10 square feet are mine because they're directly adjacent to my property. They actually own an unnamed portion of the entire thing, as do all of the residents who share that common alley. So technically, no one of them would be able to block off the alley without the consent of everybody else. they wouldn't even be able to technically fix the alley without the consent of everybody else. And we've on occasion waded into this because there have been areas where we've needed to make stormwater improvements. And we have needed sometimes upwards of 20 residents to all sign off on paperwork that says they're indemnifying the city and that they're going to allow us to repave the road. And it has been a major challenge in a lot of situations, both for the city and for developers to actually do anything with the common alleys. So I think in this case, the developer certainly has a right to that alley because they're an adjacent landowner, but to make changes to it really involves a more complex set of stakeholders, and the city would actually have no authority in that situation other than advocacy.
Yeah, I don't know how wide it is, but it looks like that could be some sort of risk, some sort of hazard there. One vehicle's coming from the Shipping Street side and another one's coming from the Fulton Street side.
I'd say from being out there, there's certainly room for vehicles to maneuver, and they do. And because of, especially now with our plan cutting off right now you can drive down that and then enter the Catherine Hershey property and continue on a straight shot to Plum Street. And I think that's the sort of thing that more creates a circumstance for dangerous cut-through traffic. With this actually just going from Shipping to Fulton, it's not really much of a cut-through, and I think really the narrowness leads to it being something you navigate carefully. The other unique part, I think, Douglas, that I've heard at Traffic Commission meetings where this has come up on other alleys, is that even if all of the owners agreed to make it one way and posted such signs, the city police would not enforce that, and they don't actually have the jurisdiction to enforce it because it's a common alley and not a public street.
Thank you.
I actually want to jump on that from a different perspective here. So I have a lot of concerns about the entrance on Walnut Street. I don't have as many concerns about the exit on Plum Street because I do understand cars got to exit somewhere. So I'll start with this. How many students are anticipated to be attending the school?
150.
150. All right. And what's the proposed hour for drop off of the students?
If you want to speak to that.
So I'm Senator Alexander. I am the executive director of the Catherine Hershey Schools for Early Learning. So what we see is that our normal hours of operations are between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. And so we see really kind of between 7 a.m. and probably about 9:30 is where we see. And so we don't see, so it's not like it's normal school traffic where like everybody comes at one drop off like at 8 o'clock. Normally what you'll see is that basically parents, based on their work schedules of when they might come. So you see kind of a slow trickle of families that kind of come in with the peak, with the final happening kind of around that 9 o'clock. And then on the other side, around probably about between 4 and 6, you see the same type of traffic that also then starts to happen as parents start to get off work and are ready to then start to pick up. So once again, it's a slow trickle, but it's not like it's everybody coming in at once because everybody needs to be there when it comes to pick up and drop off.
All right, because I was definitely worried about like the idea of 100, like let's just say one car per student, 150 cars showing up all at once, especially with that there's such little space from such a major intersection there. I have a lot of concerns about that for that reason, because like I just see a world where these cars are coming in, and you know how it is at schools, and you know why I'm asking the questions, is that all the cars line up, whether it pick up or drop off, and then things get backed up, and I'm worried that utilizing the existing, I understand there's an existing curb cut there, and I also know it's noted in the notes here that that's why it's not 10 feet away from the property line. It's a massive concern for me, from like just the flow of traffic through the city, especially for biking traffic. That, as I noted when this came up at the last meeting, I'm concerned that there's two existing driveways. I understand one's on the adjacent property and one's on this property, but that's two different potentials for a car to go, oh yeah, I wasn't looking left for a bike, boom. It really concerns me, and I just feel like the utilization of the common alley, I understand currently it's common, but it seems like it might be wide enough to allow dedication in the future potentially. are you anticipating needing to get a signal permit for a school zone sign at all?
No.
Okay.
No. And I will say too, I mean, I think this was significantly studied. So we ultimately, in terms of the number of new trips involved, did not require a full traffic study, but we did end up providing a series of supplemental reports beyond just a basic traffic generation statement to satisfy the city engineer as to specifically those concerns with the entry into the Walnut Street Drive, you know, whether just in terms of how it impacts traffic, whether, you know, essentially a deceleration lane would be warranted, not that that necessarily would fit with the other pieces that are there, but that was some of the analysis that was done by the project's traffic engineer, and then that ultimately did meet with, you know, satisfaction of the city engineer as to the safety of that entrance. But that was not a foregone conclusion when we started the process and working with Cindy McCormick on that. I think the challenge, you know, one of the challenges with Tobacco Avenue, just disregarding the interior of the site, is just that, you know, the ability of both Shippen and Fulton to handle the additional traffic is different than it being staying on a major road like Walnut Street, which is where, you know, just it has that ability. It's got 2 lanes. But then we do have this real struggle with the site itself that as you come in from Tobacco Avenue, we are, I believe, at least 5 feet above the interior of the site, right at the property line. Right now, it's a fairly steep entrance in, but then the interior of the site also has to continue to slope. I believe at over 5% is how it's graded now, which then becomes a struggle with trying to have accessible drop-off and loading zones inside, which is kind of driven down the interior.
May I interrupt?
Yeah.
Because I just want to keep on plowing through. Because like, there's a pedestrian bridge in the plan, which I know is not necessarily cheap. So I know that the design already takes into account the fact that vehicular traffic is coming through here potentially could be a liability for the children. I actually agree with Commissioner Cook down there about the idea of one-way traffic, because I envision a world where the people dropping students off come down, they would turn down. Oh man, I'm totally blanking. Is that Shippen Street down there? The one-way street just down. You can't even see it on the map. But then you would turn in to Tobacco Alley from that road and exit onto Fulton there. Or exit through to Plum Street. That's how I envision one-way traffic flow through there to give the additional space for potentially a line of cars. But it just, I personally see a plan that recognizes the dangers of vehicles here and, in my opinion, does not necessarily resolve those issues and leaves a lot of things on the table for potential issues going forward that may not be addressed. So I guess maybe I should be asking Mr. Smith a question here. Actually, before I do that, in any of the conversations was potential two-way conversion of Walnut Street brought up? Because I'm thinking about the future of how, because that's something that has been raised in the city before, and I feel like this muddies those waters in the future depending on how you're managing your traffic flows. So I'm just curious, and I want to apologize and say I'm not trying to grill a school. In fact, like a school, my great grandfather went through Milton Nursery Industrial School. I would not be up if it wasn't for Milton Nursery School. So I really value the work you guys are doing. But this is a big concern for me. My question, Mr. Smith, was going to be: is it possible for us to add a condition of approval that should there be traffic flow issues, Milton Nursery School is expected to resolve them in some way? And that's what I'm going to pass here. I don't want to see someone get hurt on a bike or walk in or otherwise.
So I just like to just maybe address that a little bit, and so maybe a little bit more. One, we don't see that we don't feel that it's going to be kind of a one-to-one, that it'd be 150 cars. Normally what we see, and we just opened up our first center in Hershey, normally we see siblings, right? So normally we're actually probably talking about probably closer to kind of the 100, 120 actually families that are actually going. And on top of that, not only do we actually see that, but we also are providing transportation as well. And so even that even means even a portion of that, even those 120 families, it is also even bringing down how many actual, because it's basically, we have basically vans that basically carry about 8 children in each of those vans. And so we do 2 to 3 runs for that. So once again, that's another thing that's bringing down just how many we're actually talking about in terms of how much traffic's actually going to be going into this one. We also see that folks, just because of it being in a city, that there might be some that might be walking as well to be able to access the place as well. So I don't really see that it's going to be, we don't envision that it's going to be 150 cars that are going to be going there. And on top of that, when you take into account really the trickle effect that normally happens in these types of things, we don't normally see a big rush of families coming in at 7 o'clock just because of just the way just work life is really for our families and things like that. So I think that is really, when we think about all the things, that's really where a lot of this kind of drove from, is that there's so many different pieces that are playing into this that we don't expect that it's going to be 150 cars that are going to be coming in as you think about all the other factors that are going.
I actually really appreciate the fact that you guys are shuttling. That was encouraging to hear earlier, and I apologize if my ask of students made it seem like there were definitely going to be 150 cars. Like I said, I'm just concerned about the traffic flows here, but I'm really looking forward to seeing this project happen, which is why I wanted to know if there was a way we can secure the safety of not just your students, but also people of Lancaster, or even the people just passing through Lancaster, should we decide to approve this tonight. Is there any way we can, do that? I know I'm talking about crazy, or quote-unquote crazy things here by talking about two-way conversions, but I'm really trying to think about down the pipeline how all of the pieces could play into this and addressing it now before we approve it.
Hey Douglas, before you answer that, out of curiosity, and I understand where you're coming from, Tony, because I do think that there's probably some value in a consideration to Tobacco Avenue being two-way, if it really is. And I've not been out on the site, so I don't know the width, I don't understand it fully. But rather than make that a condition of the development approval and burden the developer, is that not a conversation that would then be, if we really do have an issue over the course of time, is that not something that maybe the city would be able to approach the owner, the property owner about? Would it be handled that way since they've met the requirements of the ordinance? Or is there really a necessary, I'm just trying to understand, because from my perspective, if I was a municipal official and I saw something happening that was a challenge, I think my first thought process would be to have a meeting with the property owner and maybe those co-owners of that shared alley to discuss ways that we could potentially come to a solution. But when you make it as a condition, then it really restricts future development or changes to that property.
Okay, let's see, how do I approach all that? I would say, just for starters, it's my understanding that regarding traffic design, this project has met all our ordinances and expectations from staff. Walnut Street has not been, to the best of my knowledge, considered for two-way conversion. It was initially thought of that potentially Chestnut and Walnut as a pair could be. You might remember conversations from years ago about, some of that. But we have a two-way conversion study out right now. It does not include Walnut as part of that. I don't think that a conversion would complicate much of what's proposed here, personally, if the city were to initiate that. Regarding additional conditions, I would be reluctant to impose conditions regarding changes to traffic flow without my traffic engineer colleagues helping me to design that or those conditions. And given that this has been deemed satisfactory after pretty thorough review, I think my inclination is to proceed with the conditions as we have them written. If such issues arise, I imagine it would be as much a concern of the schools as it would be of the cities if something was not functioning on site. Keep in mind that the majority of the parking is actually off-site, so a lot of staff and others will be actually not coming into the site. They'll be walking from down further east on Walnut Street, which I think is a benefit to the safety of the site too. Traffic Commission would be the body where we could explore changes to things in the right of way. If we do need additional signs, like, I'm just shooting from the hip here. I'm not necessarily suggesting we pursue these, but, school signs or any kind of flashing signs that indicate a school zone, we could bring that up to our city engineer and explore any of that. And I think we could do that after the fact here with the development. Happy to connect you with, I know Ben knows how to get in touch with everyone at City Hall, but if we need to explore any changes around signage or suggested speed limits, I know some of the school zones have like a 20-mile-an-hour speed zone during school operation and flashing signs. If need be, I know the loading on this site, it's a little bit different from how some of the other schools function, because this is all happening internal to the site, whereas if you can imagine, like Reynolds Middle School, for instance, and many of the other schools, Washington Elementary, people are pulling up at the curb, and there's not as much of an internal circulation system there. So anyway, I'm happy to explore any and all of those options if you'd like. But personally, on behalf of staff, I think we're feeling comfortable with where the project is currently with traffic flows.
I have a question regarding the STEM garden.
Mm-hmm.
Will that be available on after hours for children within the neighborhood, or is that like fenced and blocked out that other kids couldn't utilize that play area?
So it is fenced in, and so right now it's not really that it's just available just for use. But we do think that part of it is that in being a part of the community, we do feel like that we would have events there. So like on a Saturday, and we'd be able to do with obviously our staff there that are a part of that and those types of things. So we do think that community building is a really big part of our work. And so while it won't be just free access, we do see that there will be community events that would happen in that particular area that would bring the community in. So yeah.
That's great, thank you. And then as far as the new project, or the project as a whole is concerned, how many new employees do you anticipate needing to operate the school?
Sure. So it is up to 80 staff members that are in the facility.
80 staff members?
Yes.
And Mr. Smith, how close do we have any public transit or bus stops within like a super close proximity of that location?
That is a good question. Do you know? Bus 12, Mr. Whalen says. Do you know where that happens to stop?
Do you know how close that stop is?
Yeah, I'm not sure, and I know that they're redoing their routes right now too, so I'd have to look at the map to see what their new transit plan proposes.
So I just think with 80 staff members and 150 families, a bus station or consideration for a bus station in really close proximity could be super beneficial to this particular project.
And we might have covered this already. Is there bike parking, mostly thinking about staff, but also potentially for families?
Yes, we do have the bike parking in accordance with the ordinance requirements, both in front of Building 2 as well as near to the entrance of Building 4. I think that actually totals to about 8 spaces.
And then can you just speak to the lighting plan and the safety aspects of that parking? Because, and maybe once the construction of it is done, that land is sloped pretty good, if I recall correctly. So are there any safety concerns during the evening or dark hours?
No, I mean, the electrical engineer, focused on the lighting plan development, and so I'm trying to recall exact locations of things, but that was something that was reviewed for meeting the city's ordinance in terms of uniformity and light levels, and there is lighting considered both within the Building 3 parking area underneath and how you come in from the outside, which is a lit environment, to that interior also lit area. And then there will be lighting for the parking throughout the interior of the site.
Is the ground level parking open? Or is it enclosed?
It is, I'm trying to recall from a code perspective whether it's open or closed, but I mean, it's certainly, we have panels that are on the north face, so there's free airflow between them, but it's at the same time highly screened from the street.
So you can just walk like under the middle of that building if you wanted to?
I wouldn't say that, no.
I guess what I'm asking is, like, if I would come in off of the entrance off of Walnut Street, where the building area opens, I'm not able to just walk in and underneath that building, or would I be able to walk in and underneath that building?
I mean, in theory, you could come in along the access drive. You can see sort of with the arrangement of the parking where the opening is on the west side of the building. You could walk in there, and then there are various doors within that building, some of which are secured based on what is on the other side of them. But principally, if you're entering the site and wanting to gain access to one of the buildings, there's the main entrance at the north of Building 2, and then Building 4, and then also at the western end, but the north side of Building 1.
Just for clarification, it's safe to assume that under building parking, under Building 1 and Building 3 will have sufficient lighting at whatever hours
Yes.
needed?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. And just to follow up with your question on the earlier project, we do have accessible parking spaces distributed between those various parking areas to address the various entrances on the site.
Quick follow-up to the lighting, I promise this is it, but I'm a little very familiar with the main campus, Moulton Nursery School. Security cameras are a huge thing for you guys. Is this going to be as heavily monitored?
Yeah. I mean, yes, safety and security is kind of our number one thing for obviously our children, our families, in the community. So absolutely, it will still have the same safety and security.
Yeah, and I just wanted to piggyback off of Cole's comment. That's really where I was going with that in terms of getting in underneath those parking, areas and making sure that we're safe.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, and I can add to that when we're at after hours times and the facility's closed and there's no need for families to access, there will be gates on the access drives as well as the pedestrian entrances to the core of the site. So, right. But there will be a lighting as appropriate, one, because of this time of the year, and then also should staff need to be there or anything else, there will clearly be access and, coordinated with fire department and all of that.
I'd like to make a comment if I could, Mr. Chair. Two things. I am excited about an organization with the reputation that you all have, that you're coming into Lancaster. And Douglas, again, please, if you could go to the image that shows the corner of the Catherine Hershey.
Oh, sorry about this. I'm trying to zoom out of the image and it's not letting me.
Well, now,
There we go. Okay.
It's obvious that someone has inclusivity in their mind, so I appreciate that as well.
We'll give a shout out to Tibbetts Weaver.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes. Tibbetts Weaver, the architect, did do that, but it is one of those things that I am happy that I learned a long time ago. Is something to check when an image comes across my desk. Both working on many development projects in the city, but also getting to work on city park projects as well, understanding who is here and making sure that they're represented. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I just also wanted to have a quick comment. Also really excited that you guys are coming to Lancaster City generally, but also to finally see the site being redeveloped after many years of being vacant and kind of one development plan after another falling through. But I think most importantly, excited that this institution is coming to Lancaster and meeting a absolutely critical community need. I mean, not having access to daycare services or being able to afford daycare services really has a huge impact on folks, especially those that are lower income capacity to find work, to keep work. So thank you guys for coming to Lancaster. We're really excited to have you here.
I just want to say, I had twins who graduated with Milton Hershey main campus, so I'm real familiar with your school and how well it's kept and how invested you are with the students. So I'm happy to see that it's coming here. What is the timeline? Yeah, that's really my question is in terms of completion.
I'm trying to remember what that end date is. I've been very focused on our upfront dates here, but for construction.
Yeah, so when we think about just our expansion into Lancaster County right now, we're looking at really beginning of 2026 is that we'll start to see some of these centers start to go open, because right now it's planned 3 centers here in Lancaster County. So one in Lancaster City, one in New Danville, and then one in Elizabethtown. So we start to see some of those centers that'll start open in 2026 is what we're looking at, depending on construction.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to conditionally approve the preliminary and final land development plan with the modifications or waivers listed and conditions listed.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, public comment? Yes, sir. Yes.
Good evening, Bill Hannigan, 300 block of College Avenue. The idea of this image representing the current situation, there's a bike lane, and that bike lane would be crossed by motorists turning into the property to help children arrive there. Given the age of the children, up to age 5, I guess I just want to make sure that they will be dropped off in the interior, that there's no chance for them to be dropped off outside the perimeter or someone, taking some part of that bike lane away to double park or whatever, if there's congestion or whatever, for that child not to be dropped off literally inside the boundary. I don't want to make an assumption that, it will happen in every case, and I just wonder if it's required. Then given that there'll be staff parking farther east on Walnut Street, I'm wondering, will that access be controlled? Are there spots over and above the number of spots needed for 80 staffers? Could a parent or someone participating in the program, someone coming with an interest in going to the property, will they be using that parking lot farther east on Walnut Street, or would that be restricted, and how would it be restricted? Only to the staff, as so far as I understand at this point. Thank you very much.
To the first question, I do know that it's part of the model and the plan and the requirements of the families coming to the site that students do need to, people who are coming in a car need to park, and they need to bring the child into the center and sign them in. It is not going to be a circumstance where you're allowed to drop off children, even if they're, closer to 5 and a little bit more able to navigate things on their own. So that is certainly something that's different maybe than some other school environments. And that's certainly something that I think, the school is able to enforce, that families follow those procedures. In terms of the other parking, we, as part of getting the off-site parking permissions from the zoning hearing board, we did have to enter into a formal agreement with that other landowner that does stipulate the exact areas of the lot that we're able to use, the number of cars that are able to be there. And in terms of them being used by staff only, that's another thing that, the school is going to provide signage there and will be, through their agreements with parents and staff, discussing and enforcing who can park in those locations. And then from that landowner standpoint, I don't believe they have any interest in allowing additional cars to be parked in areas that are outside of where the agreement is without some kind of change to it. So that's at least what is in place in that fashion.
Sure. The scenario of having to pull onto the property, find a spot, park, and escort that child into the building to be registered, to be acknowledged, we're changing custody from the parent or from the driver or what have you to the school. I see that, I don't know how much width there is for more than one lane of traffic. So someone takes over a long time, everything backs up behind them. This is a choke point. This is a bottleneck in my mind. And I'm seeing these arrows a little bit larger, a little bit more clearly now. At the bottom of the screen, there's arrows in opposite directions. So maybe there is only in the pulling off of Walnut Street, there may be one lane only, and all pointing toward Plum. And for the person who delays, or there's a problem, or there's something that's unexpected, this is a bottleneck. Mr. Smith mentioned Reynolds Middle School. I live that life every day. I see that where backups occur, and the flow is brought to a halt because some person can't anticipate a need or a circumstance or whatever, and everything stops. It's pandemonium out there. I live it.
So I do want to clarify that the area that you're seeing along this lane here is specifically for drop-off by the shuttles that are operated by Catherine Hershey School. The parking spaces on the lower level of Building 3, as well as all of the parking spaces to the north of Building 1 in the exterior, are the places that parents are required to park to get out and take their children. And I believe that puts us at about close to 40 spaces that are available for them. And if I'm remembering the peak hour traffic correctly, we're potentially at 50 cars per hour related to the parents and families coming onto the site. So you're really getting at a capacity where you could easily have people taking half an hour to do that swap before we are starting to get an actual bottleneck of cars on the site and not enough parking spaces. But the intent is that families will park those cars and then come back to them, which does have a time component to it, but it does get rid of the concern of the drop-off zones, which I've lived that as a parent being in some of those, especially during the COVID pandemic. They got incredibly long. I've also recently been working on a redevelopment project for a private school in another municipality that does have that issue of everybody's got to be there at 7:30 and it's going to be a giant line. And here again, we're spread out over a few hours. We're providing actually the parking spaces, and this was a lot of what we were looking at with our traffic engineer, was to understand what is that turnover rate so that we don't have that problem. Because if we do have that problem, then it's true, the school doesn't function. So it's something we've been making sure is going to work.
And that bike lane is not protected, right? It's not behind the cars. There's nothing, like there's a small, this small strip here is just protected area, a buffer between the bike lane and the road. There's no cars parked in that area, correct?
Correct, yeah. You can see parking up
Right.
here. This shows where that gets picked up, but this portion here is just like a non-structural painted buffer area for the cyclists.
If you had to guess, what do you think that distance is? And I'm only thinking from like a visual standpoint, if there would be a biker in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think these bike paths are somewhere around 6 feet wide, give or take. And so if you look at the buffer here at the end is, looks like wider than the bike path there. So that, it could be 7 feet and it might narrow down to 4 or so, 4 or 5 along this stretch.
Okay.
So in terms of visibility of cyclists, they're heading west here. Traffic is also heading west, and there's no cars parked here. There should be good visibility of what's happening when they're turning in here. The trees were kept back for sightlines. You can actually see that there's sightlines actually drawn in here just to ensure that pedestrians are visible as well. And then, of course, the hatching out in front here just to indicate the bike lane itself. I think we use green paint there as well, just to make that high visibility.
I just want to thank everybody for who is talking about the bike lanes and the hazards here. I mean, part of my anxiety comes from, and I do recognize the sight line is well beyond the legal requirement. Like, you can potentially see those people. My anxiety just comes from the fact that, I've been in the city's bike lanes and people have been negligent. I've almost been hit on Lemon Street, or that intersection of Walnut and Lemon Street. But all that aside, all the concerns I've had aside, genuinely, I'm looking forward to this school coming to our community. Like I said, my great-grandfather went to Milton Hershey Industrial School, and it's part of why I'm a little emotional, because I'm having trouble separating those things. So just thank you for your consideration, thank you for coming to the community, and thank you to everyone for actually indulging me in these concerns.
I have a question, Douglas. I think it's on the south side, Fulton Street. Is there an area right next to that tree? Is that a walkway into where you could get to building number 4 entrance?
I believe so. I'll let Mr. Morgan confirm that.
Yes, there is a walkway from Fulton that then connects up past Building 1 and goes to a ramp to Building 4, though there are stairs to the right.
Okay,
Yep.
so that's another entryway that's
Yes.
possible.
Yes.
You're walking, and then the other thing is coming off of Walnut Street, there's an immediate left to go into the ground level parking, so that should make it for an easy flow, I would think. Is that right? Is that the thing, maybe?
Yeah, that is the idea.
Okay, thank you.
Just curious, what's the internal pedestrian flow from that ground building parking over to Building 4? Are you walking on the street, or are you going up through the pedestrian bridge?
You are crossing the drive in that location beneath the bridge.
Thank you.
And Mr. Moore, just to clarify, there's, you can pass through this area here.
Yes.
Right, okay,
Yes.
so this is hatched for pedestrians to enter into a, vehicle-free zone under here, and then beneath the pedestrian bridge to connect. Okay.
Yep.
Any further comments? Commission, public? Mr. Hess?
Was my motion acceptable, or do I need to reintroduce that?
Why don't you restate it? I don't think I heard it a second.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds great. Yeah, so I'll make a motion to conditionally approve the preliminary and final land development plan for Milton Hershey School, conditioned on the modification request, waiver requests, and the conditions noted by the city of Lancaster.
I second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor with Catherine Hershey Middle School conditions. Ready for the question? All in favor, let it known by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carried. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, we're very much looking forward to this school coming to the city.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Number 4. Certification of blighted properties. None. 5. Staff report to Planning Commission.
Yes, Chairman, I will make this brief, but just give me one moment to pull a document for you all. So, as you might recall, C.S. Davidson is the engineering firm that's helping us with plan reviews, and they've been working closely with staff. They take an initial stab at doing a plan review, then they provide it to city staff, who do a review of their work and add additional comments or make adjustments, and then those letters go out to developers. This is a project list that they provided us, and in our previous conversations, I think there was some interest in just wanting to understand what all is in the pipeline and under review. So this is their latest project list that they gave us. We have meetings with them every 3 weeks approximately. So I just want to show this to you so you kind of know what all we're working on. And most of these notes are updated. We heard about the Lombardo's land development plan. And we knew that we had to do some additional review here, but they're eager to move forward with construction, and we expect that to begin probably next week. 759 Manor Street, this is a project you had conditionally approved. And I just want to note that this demo permit's on hold for Lombardo's until they sorted out things with you all tonight. 759 Manor, this is the youth home that you all reviewed, conditionally approved. We're just waiting to get conditions met on that project. 232 North Prince Street, we have Mr. Lesher in the audience here. We're just awaiting a resubmission of that project, and that'll come back to you at some point for hopefully a recommendation of approval. They do still need to go through Historical Commission too. 118 North Prince, you got the latest on that this evening, so the approval status has now changed to conditionally approved. They too need to go through Historical Commission, and that was included in the comment letter for conditions of approval. 422 Ruby, this project we're just waiting on a compliance submission, but you've already approved this. This was the, I think initially it was pitched as a Cavalar location down in southwest on Ruby. Community Learning Center, we're almost at the finish line with getting them recorded, but we're just waiting on one more submission review from them. So you see we have a lot that you all have approved there's a lot of legwork after that between staff and the development team to get these things to the finish line. Stadium Road 2, you all hopefully haven't forgotten that. That was conditionally approved. Same with Catherine Hershey. And we're still waiting on the Park City resubmission, and that should be coming to you, I think, maybe later this month or in early March. It's just a simple subdivision. Some other projects we made notes on. Let's see, this is Fairview and South Duke. I think that is actually an incorrect note there, but this is Chesapeake and South Duke. They've submitted a sketch plan for a 4-story mixed-use project there in partnership with Vanguard, private or market rate units with pharmacy and healthcare, urgent care center on the first floor. So that's a huge win for the Southeast, and that'll be coming to you guys hopefully sometime this summer. 213 College Ave. Remaining tree issues, as we all know, no permits are being issued until all of that is resolved. They did have their groundbreaking today, which maybe you caught wind of, so they're still trying to sort through final issues before permits are released for construction, but that plan was recorded. Yes?
I want to jump on plan being recorded, because you and I had spoken on the phone briefly. Given that it was produced in color and then recorded in black and white, is there anything that can be done to rectify that? Because like I just remember I was genuinely like lost on what was happening once I started reviewing the plan online. I just wanted to ask.
Yeah, there's no recourse there really at this point because the plan's been recorded. We have color copies, and when we're referencing for inspections and all of that, we will be using the copies that have color on them. But yeah, going forward, we need to be a little bit more careful about that when we get to the stage of recording. Thankfully, it was an issue that I think we were, if we strained our eyes a little bit, able to see the differences there in the tree symbology. But yeah, unfortunately, there's what's done is done with the county recorder of deeds. Yeah. Any questions or additional comments on any of these projects? This list does not include most of the conceptual projects that we're working on, some of which don't have public applications attached to them. The one that's not listed here, actually, maybe that's what this note was intended to mean. The Lancaster EMS has a sketch plan into us for a site at 715 Fairview down near Angleside intersection. So they'll be coming. They'll be submitting a project soon for a new maintenance center that they're building there. And that concludes my report for this evening. So.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Other business? Any further public comment?
Bill Hannigan, 300 block of College Avenue. The staff report that was just shown for information purposes, or if that was other under business for information purposes, brought me to a primary concern I have, which was 213 College Avenue. And I've been in communication with Mr. Smith about the issuance or non-issuance of permits regarding tree removal. I have learned in December that some information was released to at least two members of the commission regarding the status of the unresolved tree issues with 213 College Avenue, and I am following up with that and requesting further information. I have been in contact with Mr. Smith again in January, and Ms. Austin in January regarding the status of permits and where the city stands versus the possible approval of permits. The idea that the project today held a groundbreaking to me is a misrepresentation. They're not ready. They do not have, in my opinion, anywhere near what they need. In fact, the document from Mr. Smith in December implied that 2 out of 3 permits are, let's say, foreseeable. 0 permits have been issued to this point, if I may make that clear. And I think 2 of the 3 permits will never be approved by the owners of the properties involved. These are private properties. These are landmark trees. These are protected trees. And in speaking with one owner at 655 West Chestnut, her tree is well above the 24-inch diameter at breast height. It's more like 38 inches. And that tree is a magnificent testament to the American elm, standing more than 100 years ago, and before certainly before Saldo was improved, and now we have Saldo, and now we have people who are trying to do whatever means possible to circumvent the statutes of Saldo, 210 and 217 regarding tree protection. So these are impasses in my mind. The person I mentioned at 655 says no. The person at 657 has abandoned residency in the United States. He's in Russia. He's got a new family in Russia and has no contact with anybody here that he was at a time friendly with, has not responded to any inquiries for them. Mr. Bousman, Charles Bousman, how about that tree? No answer. So that the city might be able to engage this person who left everybody with the impression he had distaste for the city of Lancaster, I find hard to believe. And that way, representing in this doc, look like they're in line to have done to them what the developer wants to have done with them. I object. I don't think that's the case. I've asked for documentation, and I will pursue that further. I have heard enough tonight to ask a more informed question that I learned from attending tonight's meeting, and I benefit from attending these meetings, and I appreciate it. It's been more than 3.5 years now that I've been attending these meetings, and to a large degree, 250, but then 213 College Avenue being my concerns. Tonight, Mr. Smith brought up the idea of calculating the need for street trees, 1 per every 25 feet of frontage, and how that may be too stringent. And I wonder, is there another example, perhaps on the state level, of a requirement of street trees? Has the city gone over and above some other model for requiring street trees at 1 per 25 feet? Now, follow it up with the idea that tree protection, I understand, as far as Saldo goes, as it relates to the city, it's a pretty stiff requirement. 210 and 217 of Saldo regarding tree protection are very stringent, particularly in the face, I think I understand, about state requirements. But I'm hearing from these developers, I'm hearing from the parties that are invested in this 213 College Avenue, we're going to push for the state more relaxed enforcement of tree protection. And we're going to allow people to come in and just shear off these trees, which do overhang 213 College Avenue. Yes, they do. There's no question about the crowns of these landmark trees, the crowns of these protected trees hang over 213 College Avenue. And maybe by some freak escape hatch through a state application of an ordinance, they can shear off these trees. Well, that's going to kill the trees. But by Saldo, those trees cannot be touched. They cannot be touched where their crowns extend. They cannot be touched where their crowns interlock, where the root systems interlock, plus 5 feet. That's going a piece into 213 College Avenue. And I will stand here and I will say that the ink is dry on Saldo. Long before HDC came along with this proposal, which I'm not questioning the worthiness of, it's just too big for the lot. It's too big for the size of space they're trying to shoehorn 64 units into. And the price tag, I was at the ceremony today, and they're touting, all these funds that have come together, and this happy camp, this big tent of participants who have come together to make this project carry it as far as it has. But the problem is, they're running up against Saldo. And Saldo says no. Thank you very much for listening. These meetings are crucial. I'm sorry that a meeting was not held January 17th. A lot of these things got bottled up in me because it's been that long since a meeting came about. And in fact, twice tonight, I feel 213 College Avenue came up in a significant way. And I get a chance to address these issues. And your patience and your understanding is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Mr. Chair, may I also want to say thank you for being at these meetings. It's very uncommon that we get residents, and I want to acknowledge that you and I discuss issues, and we have a difference of opinion on the matter, but I always try to give you the most correct information, even if we don't agree opinion-wise on what to do with that information. I think it's good that Lancaster has residents like you who engage with the local government, because without engaging with the local government, we don't understand how these things work. And I appreciate you saying you're learning stuff too, because I'm learning stuff as we go here as well. And I don't disagree with you about the notion that maybe these issues, not maybe, in my opinion, I also agree with you that some of these issues should be resolved first instead of just kind of going forward and giving the illusion that in some way that they are resolved. Because I also feel that the issue should be resolved. Furthermore, I want to say that as far as the state law goes, I'm not a lawyer, but I would at least raise the question of, well, these are natural resources and protecting them is in our state constitution, which is why I think that if this is a matter that needs to be resolved for the building to go up, it needs to be resolved, and I think it's an important one to resolve. So I just want to say thank you for coming, expressing your opinion always, and just also helping me learn by engaging me as a commissioner about what's going on in these processes.
Thank you.
Any further comment from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I'll address a pending ordinance with City Council that I believe Mr. Hannigan was perhaps mentioning. So our city solicitor has reviewed our shade tree ordinance and has reviewed it in conjunction with state law. So there's no separate application process with the state. But our tree ordinance does have to be in conformance with state law, and in particular common law. So these are laws that have been set because court decisions have been made in the past. And in our legal analysis of a multitude of cases, what we discovered is that our tree ordinance is effectively not legal in regards to the way that trees are protected. And there is well-established case law in Pennsylvania that actually, and I'll leave it to the lawyers to explain this in great detail, but trees that overhang into adjacent properties are actually under state law considered a trespass. And there have been cases where an owner of property who has a tree overhanging his property, it's been upheld by the court that they can not only remove at the property line the parts that hang over their property, but they can actually then sue the property owner that had a tree for the trespass and recoup costs that they incurred for doing so. This is not law that we created. This is not law that we may even agree with in terms of how these things are handled. But we do know that what we can't do is enforce a law that puts us in jeopardy of lawsuit and is not in conformance with what has been established at the state level. So we're trying to wrap our heads around the ramifications of this, but in the near term, what has been proposed to City Council is an amendment of the tree ordinance to define what a trespass tree is and to acknowledge that the landowner has the ability to remove the parts of the tree that are over or on their property. And again, this is being done after significant legal analysis on our end to ensure that this is the right course of action, because there are a lot of staff at the city that care very much about the preservation of trees, and we've been trying to grapple with what this means for permits going ahead. So that was introduced on Monday at City Council Committee. It'll be before Council later this month for consideration.
Okay. Thank you. Any further comment?
May I ask what time frame this possible change in the ordinance, amendment to the ordinance, what time frame are we talking about? And in the sense that it's only recently came before this commission that the HDC asked for an extension to meet the conditional use permit to go ahead with their project. Are we seeing this change in the ordinance happen within the time frame that HDC has asked for, or can this just be played out like someone, I can imagine, is trying to run out the clock on a national level? Can HDC come back and back and back and back and back till if and when this amendment to the ordinance occurs?
So whenever if the ordinance is adopted and takes effect, we would have to honor any permits submitted in accordance with that new ordinance. So the land development plan that was shown, or that was adopted here, showed those trees as being removed. And what they needed to do after that was apply for permits that would allow them to remove those trees. So, if this ordinance, or if and when this ordinance is adopted, takes effect, they would have the right to apply for permits to remove the trees from the portions of their property.
Was the application, and I find it far out of my comfort zone, to go online and look at these plans, the recordation documents that were filed in December, was it within the bounds of practice, the accepted practice, for those plans to be filed and not show these trees? Given their pre-existence to anything, that might turn in their favor, turn in the favor of HDC as the applicant. Those trees exist now. Those trees will exist in the foreseeable future in my lifetime, given that they're allowed to just flourish.
So what was shown on the plans was absolutely legal in accordance with our ordinances, and that's why they were allowed to be recorded. They were reviewed by our city solicitor, which is a step that I usually don't go through with plans. I've been doing this long enough. I generally know when a plan meets our code, but just to be extra sure, they were reviewed by our legal counsel, and they were carefully reviewed by this commission when they were created. And the conditions were met. So a plan is just a plan. It doesn't allow you to actually go out and do all of that work. You still need to get permits. So the developer intended to show those trees for removal, which it's their right to do, just like they could show a sewer line on someone else's property, which we see fairly regularly here. But then when it comes to permitting, they have to go and get the landowner's right. Now, in this case, that was the premise, that they needed to get the landowner's, approval, because that's what our ordinance says today. It was only upon further inspection that we then realized that is actually that's not legal for us to do in the state of Pennsylvania. So if and when they apply for a permit to remove those parts of the trees, they would be in conformance with a new ordinance and with state law, and they would be fulfilling the plan by pulling the permit they needed to remove those trees.
Thank you for dealing with my impatience and with my reaction. I will ask you, please, to cite case law that you're speaking of that says that the Saldo 210 and 217 are or are not legal. And I'm not going to ask you tonight, but I will follow up. I need to see that case law.
I'm going to jump in and say I think that would definitely be a question for the city solicitor to answer.
I would agree, and you may have to submit the process. Submit a right to know request is really the best way to deal with this.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting tonight. So at 8:16. Ready for the question? All in favor? Let it know by saying aye. 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 Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Wasn't as